You wake before dawn. The air is still, cool, heavy with the smell of smoke and wool. Outside, a bell tolls, low and slow, calling the town to life. You reach for your tunic and stop, because what you're about to put on isn't your choice. In medieval Europe, the clothes on your back told everyone exactly where you stood. And if you got it wrong, you didn't just look foolish. You broke the law. Sumptuary laws. Laws that dictated the color of your shirt, the length of your cloak, even the buttons you could fasten. They decided what silk merchants could wear versus what peasants must wear. They separated the lord from the laborer with thread and dye. And if you crossed that line, fines, public humiliation, sometimes worse. Today we think of fashion as freedom. Wear what you want, express yourself. But for centuries, getting dressed was an act of obedience. Let me ask you, what happens to a society when even clothing becomes a tool of control? A man of your station can wear wool, maybe linen if the harvest was kind. But silk, velvet, fur, those belong to another kind of life entirely. One stitched together by titles and gold, not toil. The law says so. The parchment pinned on the church door lists it clearly. No silk for peasants, no velvet for merchants, no ermine unless you have royal blood. Even the colors are policed. A deep purple cloak could get you fined because purple means power, and power isn't for you. You once saw a man punished for wearing boots with silver buckles. He said he'd bought them from a peddler, didn't know the rule. The magistrate didn't care. They cut the buckles off in front of him, melted them down, and handed him the fine with the words, "Know your place." You remember the look on his face, a mix of shame and anger. But no one said a word. That's how it works here. The law isn't about justice, it's about distance, the invisible walls that separate you from those above. Because in the Middle Ages, the world is built on order. God at the top, then king, then nobles, clergy, merchants, peasants, beggars. Every stitch, every thread, every button is designed to remind you where you stand in that grand design. If you wear above your rank, you threaten the entire hierarchy. And in a world terrified of chaos, that's a kind of heresy. The Lords say the laws keep society balanced. The Church says they keep souls humble. But you know the truth. They keep everyone afraid. Afraid to rise too high. Afraid to seem too proud. Afraid to stand out in a crowd where even color can betray you. You walk through the market square. A gust of wind rattles the flags overhead, each one marked with a noble crest. You see a merchant woman in a fine green dress. Too fine, maybe. The fabric shimmers when she moves. You notice the sheriff notice her. He walks over, all puffed up and righteous, and asks where she got her gown. She hesitates, then says it was a gift from her husband. That's enough. A small crowd gathers, whispers rising like smoke. The sheriff declares it unlawful display. The woman bows her head as he takes his knife and cuts a slice from her sleeve, a public mark of shame. You hear the whisper ripple through the market. She should have known better. And maybe she should have, because this world runs on obedience. Even rebellion comes in quiet forms, a hidden brooch, a forbidden color sewn on the inside of a cuff, a scrap of velvet worn where no one can see. People find ways, they always do. But the price of getting caught is heavy. Still, it's strange, isn't it? How something as soft as silk could be so dangerous. How a rule about fabric could hold the same weight as a commandment from God. You pass a tailor's workshop, hear the hiss of shears and the rhythmic pull of thread. The tailor works with deliberate care, because even he can be punished if a noble complains. If the sleeves are too long, or the trim too rich, or the fabric too fine. You think of the nobles, how their garments glitter like relics, heavy with jewels, gold thread, and fur from distant lands. Their fashion isn't just vanity, it's armor. Every embellishment tells a story of power, purity, and divine favor. When they walk through the church doors, the light from the stained glass dances off their silks like halos. It's theatre. A display meant to dazzle and remind everyone else that God smiles upon them first. But the irony, whispered in corners, is that many of these laws were born from envy. Nobles feared the rising merchant class, the ones growing rich through trade. The idea that a cloth seller or spice importer could dress like a duke terrified them. So they wrote laws to draw the line. In England, a law once banned anyone below a knight from wearing cloth worth more than 6 shillings a yard. In France, only nobles could wear gold embroidery. In Florence, only certain families could use scarlet dye. The punishments varied: fines, confiscations, public humiliation. But the real punishment was psychological. You learned not to desire. Because desire meant danger. So you dress in drab wool and pretend it's comfort. You eat plain bread and pretend it's enough. And when you see a noble's cloak catching the sun, you look away. Out of respect, yes, but also self-preservation. You wonder if the nobles ever feel the weight of their own rules, whether the endless display exhausts them too, always performing status, always fearing to fall. Because make no mistake, the sumptuary laws bind them as well. A duke couldn't wear a king's colours, a baron couldn't wear a crown's embroidery. Every level of society watched the one above and below, each terrified of misstep. A kingdom of mirrors, each reflecting its own fear. By evening, the market quiets. The sun dips low, turning the rooftops amber. You sit by the fire and remove your boots. Simple leather, mud-caked, safe. You imagine a world where clothing was just clothing, where color was expression, not confession. But not tonight. Tonight you live in a world where fabric is fate. The bell tolls again in the distance. Soft, deliberate. You watch the firelight flicker across the rough weave of your sleeve and think how strange it is that something as ordinary as cloth could control the course of a life. And yet it does. Because in the medieval world, obedience is the finest garment of all. The day exhales, shutters close, fires dim, and the streets of your town fall into a hush that feels heavier than silence. Somewhere in the distance, a single note rings out, low, resonant, ancient. The curfew bell. You've heard it every night of your life. It's not just a sound, it's a command. When that bell tolls, everything stops. You smother the embers in your hearth, whisper a quick prayer, and pull your cloak tight. Outside, the air smells faintly of smoke and damp stone. Because in the medieval world, night isn't peaceful. It's dangerous. There are no street lamps, no watchful glow from windows. Just darkness, thick and total. A single spark could set half the town aflame. And so, the bell tells everyone the same thing. Put out your fire or risk everything. Curfew comes from the French couvre-feu. Cover fire. The name says it all. When William the Conqueror ruled England, he made the curfew law strict. Every evening, the bell would ring, and all lights and fires had to be extinguished. Disobedience meant fines, or worse, suspicion. You can almost picture it now. The sound of boots echoing in the narrow lane. A guard knocking at a door. A frightened family fumbling to hide the last flicker of flame beneath an iron lid. Because a forgotten ember could mean ruin. Houses are made of timber, roofs of thatch, and walls lined with dry straw. Fire travels faster than mercy. The rule makes sense, you think. And yet, there's something unsettling about how absolute it is. Once the bell sounds, even time feels different. The world shrinks to a whisper. You can't visit a neighbor. You can't drink by the tavern fire. You can't even light a candle without fear that someone might see the glow and report you. Darkness becomes the law. You sit by the hearth, now cold, and listen to the last embers sigh. Outside, Dogs bark and then go quiet. Somewhere a cat yowls and then nothing, only the wind through the cracks in the wall. The curfew bell rings again. One final note to remind everyone that the night belongs to the church, to God, and to fear. It's strange to think how much control that single sound holds. It decides when you sleep, when you stop working, when your home must go dark. You've heard the elders say the bell keeps the peace, that before it nights were wild. Thieves, drunkards, and wanderers roamed the streets. People vanished. So, the bell became protection, a ritual to tame the chaos. And yet it also became a leash. When the sound ends, you realize how used you are to obeying it, how even your heartbeat seems to slow in rhythm with its tolls. There's comfort in it too, in surrender. You don't have to decide when to end the day. The town decides for you. The bell becomes a lullaby, one that hums of safety and submission. You think of the watchmen outside, lanterns hooded to dim orange glows. Their steps move in pairs through the dark, voices low. They're not there to comfort. They're there to enforce. And if a window flickers after curfew, they'll knock. Sometimes politely, sometimes not. Because fire isn't the only thing the law wants to extinguish. It's also about control, of behavior, of movement, of thought. Night is when rebellion stirs, when secrets unfold. And a town asleep is a town obedient. You imagine the curfew bell not as a warning, but as a spell, one that binds the town in collective stillness. In monastic life, the rhythm is even stricter. Monks follow the bell like a heartbeat, marking hours of prayer, labor, silence. Even in the monastery, the couvre-feu echoes through cloisters, signaling the end of earthly duties. The difference between sacred order and civic control becomes thin, a sound wave between piety and punishment. The fire laws spread across Europe. In Paris, fines could bankrupt a household. In Florence, even blacksmiths had to douse their forges at sunset. And yet, despite all that obedience, fires still came. When they did, the bells rang again, but this time faster, frantic, desperate. A second sound. One for peace, one for panic. You remember the old story of London's Great Fire centuries later, born from a single ember left uncurtained. The very fear that birthed the curfew proved itself justified. But here, in your small medieval town, the law is older, simpler, and stranger. It's about the illusion of safety, the belief that by obeying the bell, the night itself can be contained. Sometimes you lie awake long after it sounds, staring at the wooden beams overhead, wondering what the world looks like beyond the darkness. The roads empty, the taverns silent, the churchyard silver under moonlight. Somewhere, perhaps, a baker still kneads dough in secret, his hands white with flour. Or a young couple whispers under a half-shuttered window. Tiny rebellions glowing like sparks under an iron lid. But mostly, the town sleeps. And in that sleep, it feels orderly. By dawn, when the first rooster crows and a streak of light slips through your shutter, it feels as though the world is reborn, clean, quiet, safe again. You rise, relight the fire, and hear faint footsteps on the street outside. The watchmen are gone. The smoke curls upward, blue and thin. The bell will ring again tonight, as it always does. Its sound will roll across the rooftops, through the alleys, over the sleeping fields. You'll pause whatever you're doing, breathe, and obey. And maybe for a moment you'll think about what that sound really means. Not just safety, not just order, but the surrender of human will to the steady rhythm of law. Because in the medieval world, silence was safety, and the bell was the voice that demanded it. The morning begins with hunger, not the kind that gnaws, but the quiet ache of habit denied. It's Friday, which means no meat. The scent of broth drifts from the kitchen, thin and earthy. Somewhere, A neighbor's chimney curls a trail of pale smoke. You can almost smell what you're missing: pork fat, roasted goose, the sweetness of dripping bread. But today the church forbids it. And in this world, what you eat isn't just a choice, it's a declaration of faith. You sit at a rough wooden table, hands folded, staring at the bowl before you. Lentils, barley, a sliver of salted fish if you're lucky. The spoon clinks softly against the rim, a sound that feels both humble and holy. Because in the medieval world, food is never just food. It's virtue, temptation, punishment, and prayer, all at once. The church has woven appetite into morality. Every mouthful, every morsel, weighed against the scale of sin. You've been taught since childhood that the body is weak and greedy, that the stomach must serve the soul. So, you fast. Not just on Fridays, there's Lent, 40 days of restraint before Easter. There are Ember Days, vigils, saints' feasts that paradoxically demand abstinence. More than half the calendar, it seems, is marked not by what you may eat, but by what you must not. And the rules go deep. No meat on holy days, no dairy during Lent, no eggs, butter, or cheese when fasting. So people improvise. They grind almonds into milk, they press peas into meat, they cook eels, lots of eels, because somehow the church decided fish didn't count as flesh. And in the towns along the coast, the fishmongers thrive. Barrels of herring, cod, and salted sturgeon filled the docks, destined for inland monasteries and markets. The sea becomes salvation and economy. You once heard a priest say that fish cleansed the soul, that to eat it was to wash away desire, to cool the body's fire. You weren't sure whether he meant lust or hunger, but in truth, it was both. Because eating, to the medieval mind, was always tangled with sin. Too much pleasure in flavor was gluttony. Too much longing for warmth was lust. Too much fullness was pride. So even food, that most basic need, became a moral battlefield. You think of the monks, how they rise before dawn, bellies empty, and eat in silence under the watchful eye of an abbot. Their meals, small, measured, monotonous, are acts of discipline, not enjoyment. A spoonful too many could stain a soul, a stray crumb could carry meaning. And yet the higher the ideal, the stranger the reality. The church forbids indulgence, but the monasteries own vast farmlands, vineyards, and breweries. Nobles fast, but dine on fish feasts that rival any banquet. Rules bend easily when wealth blesses the table. You've seen it yourself. A lord declaring piety with his mouth full of lamprey pie, insisting it's fish because the eel swims. A bishop sipping sweet wine during Lent, calling it medicinal. A merchant paying the priest to commute his fast, silver in exchange for stew. Everyone obeys, and everyone cheats, because hunger, unlike sin, can't be confessed away. Still, you play along. At the market you buy your barley and beans. You trade gossip about who's fasting properly and who's not. It's as much a ritual as a rule, the shared performance of piety. In the evening, as the sun dips and the bells toll again, you light a small candle and whisper grace before your simple meal. A slice of bread, a bowl of stew, maybe an apple, wrinkled but sweet. And for a moment it feels clean, holy, peaceful. Then your stomach growls, and you remember that holiness often feels a lot like hunger. You think of those too poor to fast, because they're always fasting anyway. For them, the church's rules are a cruel echo. No meat today, says the priest to those who haven't tasted it all year. And yet they obey, because even hunger in this age is sacred when it's sanctioned. The rhythms of the fasting calendar shape the entire economy. Farmers plant crops to match the church's seasons. Bakers create new recipes to skirt the bans. Even kings time their feasts around holy days, not to please God, but to please their confessors. You hear whispers of strange workarounds. of geese raised on ponds so they can be declared fish, of beavers deemed edible on Fridays because, technically, they swim. A sort of theological gymnastics, half logic, half desperation. It would be funny if it weren't so serious. Because to break these laws isn't just bad manners, it's moral rebellion. A man caught eating meat on Good Friday can face public penance, flogging, even excommunication. The church's grip extends from plate to soul, and each bite, chewed or withheld, is a silent confession of faith. But as you finish your humble meal, you can't help wondering, is holiness really measured by hunger? The thought lingers like aftertaste. You imagine the saints, gaunt and radiant in their paintings, eyes turned heavenward, bodies withered by devotion. They starved themselves to transcend flesh. But you? You just want supper. You look down at your hands, calloused, stained with soil, and realize faith isn't always found in deprivation. Sometimes it's in the quiet gratitude of enough. Outside, the sky deepens to violet. The last light fades from the horizon. The world is still. The fast continues. Tomorrow will bring another rule, another restraint, another chance to prove obedience through denial. And you'll follow it as everyone does, because in this age, virtue is visible only through control. The candle flickers. The flame bows low, then steadies. You take one last bite of barley stew, close your eyes, and listen to the soft hum of the wind outside your window. The world sleeps under the watch of its own hunger, a hunger not just for food, but for purity. Because in the medieval world, eating isn't about survival, it's about salvation. The air in the church is cold, not the kind that chills, but the kind that silences, heavy, breathless, almost sacred. You stand barefoot on the stone floor, the smell of incense and iron thick around you. Somewhere nearby, a priest murmurs a prayer. Your hands tremble. Not from guilt, but from knowing that in this world, innocence isn't something you prove. It's something you survive. Before you, on a wooden table, rests a cauldron of boiling water. Bubbles rise and break in slow, deliberate rhythm. You can hear the faint crackle of the fire beneath it, the low hum of a crowd gathered outside. They've come to see the will of God revealed, because here, in the Middle Ages, truth doesn't belong to men. It belongs to heaven. And when there is doubt, when no witness speaks, no confession comes, the church turns to ordeal, a test not of logic, but of faith. You look down at your hand. In a few moments, you'll plunge it into the boiling water. You'll reach in and pull out a small iron ring from the bottom. Then the priest will wrap your arm in linen and seal it with wax. In 3 days' time, they'll unwrap it again. If the wound has healed clean, you're innocent. If it festers, you're guilty. That's the rule. That's divine justice. You swallow hard. They call it the judgment of God, Judicium Dei, a trial where the Almighty decides, not the judge. There are many kinds of ordeals. Some walk over red-hot plowshares. Some carry burning irons for 9 paces. Some are thrown into water, tied and cast into the river. If they float, they're guilty, because the water, pure and holy, rejects them. If they sink, they're innocent, though by then innocence is a quiet thing, sinking with them beneath the surface. You've seen one of those before. The way the rope snapped taut, the crowd whispering as bubbles rose. The priest declaring, God has judged. No one ever argued, because in this world the church holds the final word, and fear holds the rest. You can almost understand it, though. There are no forensics, no evidence, no lawyers. There is only belief. Belief that pain purifies, that suffering reveals truth. It sounds cruel now, but to them, it was reason. You step forward. The priest blesses the water, tracing a cross above the steam. The air smells of herbs and metal. He recites the words slowly, each syllable falling like a drop into silence. May God reveal the truth in his mercy. You nod, and plunge your hand into the boiling water. For a moment there is no sound. Then, the hiss of flesh, the gasp of the crowd, the faint echo of a scream that doesn't sound like yours. The pain is sharp, searing, holy. You pull your hand free, clutching the ring tight, proof that you obeyed. The priest wraps your arm in linen, ties it with cord, seals it with wax. His face is calm, unreadable. To him, this is procedure, ancient, practiced, unquestioned. Outside, bells toll in the distance. You think of how many before you stood in this same place, hands bound, hearts trembling, all waiting for the same impossible mercy. It wasn't always boiling water. Sometimes it was cold, icy, drawn from a holy well. Your arm would be submerged for several minutes, and afterward, the wound examined. A clean arm meant divine favor. A swollen one meant guilt. God, they said, guided the heat and the healing alike, and people believed it, because to doubt the ordeal was to doubt God himself. The strange part is, it often worked. Those who were truly convinced of their innocence sometimes came away unharmed. Fear alone could dull pain, tighten flesh, even slow infection. Faith, in that sense, really did heal, but it also condemned. The guilty, the nervous, the poor, those without a priest's favor, rarely escaped unscathed. Their burns festered, their names blackened. And so, the world kept turning, convinced that justice had been done. You leave the church with your arm bound tight. The crowd parts as you pass. Some look with pity, others with fear. No one speaks, because everyone knows the truth. It's not about guilt, it's about order. The ordeal exists to remind people that justice doesn't belong to them. It belongs to something higher, unreachable, unquestionable. And in a world ruled by divine hierarchy, that's comforting. If God decides, then no man can be blamed. Still, as you walk through the town square, the pain in your arm throbbing like a heartbeat, you can't help but wonder, what if God wasn't watching that day? What if the priest's eyes, not heaven's, decided your fate? What if truth was just another word for obedience? You shake the thought away. Dangerous thinking. That's how heresy begins. At home, you sit in the dark, your arm burning beneath the linen. The wax seal catches the light of the candle, a small, trembling flame. You try to pray, but all you can think about is the sound of the boiling water, the faces watching, the smell of iron in the air. 3 days from now, the priest will open the bandage. The wound will speak. And whatever it says, they'll call it the will of God. You close your eyes and listen to the night, to the distant toll of bells, to the muffled voices outside your door, to the slow rhythm of your own breath. For a moment, you almost feel peaceful, because pain in this world isn't just punishment, it's proof, and if you can endure it, perhaps you'll be free. Or perhaps, like so many before you, you'll simply learn that faith can burn as fiercely as fire, because in the medieval world, truth is not discovered, it's endured. It begins with a smell, sour, faint, like rot beneath the wind. Then a whisper. Someone in the next street is sick. By the time the bells toll, the town already knows. You feel it before you see it, the change in the air. Shutters close, markets empty, voices drop to murmurs, the rhythm of life, broken. The priest walks past carrying a small brass bell. Clink, clink, clink. Each ring a warning, each sound a sentence, because the plague has returned. And when it comes, so do the rules. A flag is nailed to the door of the first infected house, a crude red cross smeared with paint. Beneath it, a note in trembling ink. Lord have mercy upon us. The door is locked from the outside. The family inside doesn't come out. Sometimes they nail the boards shut. You can hear the hammering echo across the street, slow, deliberate, final. The sound of safety, they call it. You don't believe that. The plague laws are strict. Anyone showing symptoms is confined. Anyone who helps them can be punished. The dead are to be buried at dusk, without ceremony. Even mourning is regulated now. You remember the last time it came? The carts rolling through the alleys, piled with bodies. The air thick with smoke from the fires meant to cleanse it. The cries of, "Bring out your dead!" The way everyone looked away. It's happening again. You stay inside, windows shuttered, listening to the world grow smaller. The rules come down from the mayor, but everyone knows who really commands them. Fear itself. Fear makes laws faster than kings. The town watch moves through the streets with rags tied around their faces, sticks in their hands. They knock on doors, leave bread and water for those locked inside. Sometimes they don't come back. You hear stories of villages where no one survived, the gates barred, the bells tolling until the ropes broke. And then silence. Some say it's God's punishment. Some say it's bad air, miasma rising from the ground. Others blame the Jews, the beggars, the lepers, the women who live alone. There's always someone to blame. It makes the dying feel orderly. You pray at night, though the church is closed. The priest stands outside the door, chanting through a crack in the wood, his voice thin against the wind. He wears a bundle of herbs around his neck, rosemary, sage, lavender. They say the scent drives away the death. You breathe it in anyway, just in case. Inside, the air is still. You've sealed the windows with cloth soaked in vinegar. You sleep beside the fire, not for warmth, but for protection. Every sound feels sharper now, the cough of a neighbor, the creak of the stairs, the tolling of distant bells. One for each soul lost. You've lost count. By the third week, the streets are empty. The laws multiply, no gatherings, no markets, no touching the dead, no travel without a writ of health. The gates of the town are shut, guarded by soldiers with long pikes and hollow eyes. If you try to leave, they turn you back. If you try again, they raise the crossbow. Quarantine, they call it. 40 days, 40 nights. An echo of Noah's flood, a symbolic cleansing. But the rain didn't fall this time. Only ashes. You see smoke rising from the edge of town, a burning house. They say fire purifies what cannot be healed. The rules change with each rumor. Some say chickens carry the sickness, so they're killed. Some say cats, so they're drowned. The rats, of course, stay. You think about how fragile everything feels, how civilization itself seems to bend beneath invisible hands. All the rules that once governed fashion, fire, food, justice, now replaced by one. Survive. Yet even survival has its price. One night, a woman across the street cries out for help. You hear her pounding on the inside of her door. You want to go, but you don't. You tell yourself it's the law. You tell yourself it's mercy. But you know it's fear. The next morning, the street is quiet again. When the officials come to mark her door, you watch through a crack in your shutters. They nail the cross in place. The hammer strikes wood. Thunk, thunk, thunk. You whisper a prayer that she didn't die alone. Days pass. Or maybe weeks. Time loses shape when each day is the same shade of silence. You keep a small journal, though you don't write much. Just names. And the sound of the bell. Because that's what defines life now, the ringing that never stops. Sometimes you think it follows you into your dreams. Then, one morning, it doesn't. The air smells clean again. The birds have returned to the rooftops. The carts stop rolling. The mayor declares the town free of plague. People step outside like survivors of a siege, blinking, cautious, changed. The first to break the silence are the children. They run through the streets laughing, chasing one another, their feet kicking up dust from the empty road. It feels wrong somehow, too loud, too alive. You breathe deep for the first time in weeks. The wind tastes of ash and rain. But even as the laws lift, you know they never really leave. The fear remains, written into the town's bones. The crosses fade from the doors, but their ghosts stay in the wood. And in every cough, every fever, every flicker of heat, the memory stirs again. Because the plague never truly dies. It only sleeps, waiting for the next breath, the next touch, the next crowd too close together. The bells will ring again one day. They always do. You look to the horizon, the fields beyond the town, the sky wide and merciful. Life will return, as it always does, not cleansed, but humbled. And as the sun rises over the rooftops, you realize something simple and terrible. The rules were never just about disease. They were about guilt, about control, about giving shape to terror when there was no cure. You whisper a prayer, not for safety this time, but for peace. The kind that doesn't need laws to enforce it. The wind carries it away, and the world, scarred but breathing, begins again. Because in the medieval world, fear was law, and survival, the only faith left. The bells have stopped ringing. The fires are out. The streets are still. You stand at the edge of a quiet world, the medieval world, a place built on fear, faith, and fragile order. Every law you've lived through, what to wear, when to sleep, what to eat, how to prove innocence, how to survive the plague, began with one question. How do you keep chaos away? That was the heart of it. Every strange rule, every cruel custom was an attempt to draw a line between safety and danger, between sin and salvation. You realize now that these laws weren't born from madness, but from desperation. A world without medicine needed prayer. A world without police needed curfew. A world without equality needed hierarchy. And a world without answers needed God. That's the paradox of the Middle Ages. The rules feel absurd to you now, but to them, they were the thread holding reality together. Without them, life would unravel into fire, famine, and fear. The sound of the curfew bell, the sight of the red plague cross, the forbidden shimmer of silk, all reminders that survival came at the cost of freedom. That obedience was safety. You think of the tailor, trembling as he cuts velvet he'll never wear, of the merchant's wife, shamed for her dress, of the man who plunged his hand into boiling water to prove he had nothing to hide, of the family sealed behind their own door, praying through the boards for mercy. Their world wasn't just ruled by law, it was law. Everything measured, controlled, sanctified. Even the smallest act, eating, dressing, lighting a fire, had moral weight. You imagine them standing beneath the same stars you see now, believing those stars were eyes, watching, judging, protecting. Because the universe, to them, was alive with meaning. And meaning was both comfort and cage. You walk through the ghost of that world now, past the echo of bells, the whisper of parchment, the creak of wooden shoes on stone. And you wonder, have we really left it behind? Our rules just look different. They glow on screens, not scrolls. They live in algorithms instead of scriptures. We still dress to signal status, still obey unseen systems, still cling to order in the face of chaos. Maybe we've traded confessionals for comment sections, and trials by ordeal for trials by opinion. But the fear beneath it, the need for structure, belonging, certainty, that hasn't changed. You breathe in, slow and deep. The air feels cleaner now, lighter. The laws of that medieval world fade like smoke, but the lesson remains. When people are afraid, they make rules. And when those rules are believed long enough, they become truth. You close your eyes. You can almost hear the curfew bell again. Distant, hollow, soft. Not a warning this time, but a memory. A reminder that the people of that age weren't foolish or cruel. They were human and afraid, just like us. The fire crackles, the sound of your breath steadies, and as the light fades, you realize something simple and quiet. The Middle Ages weren't dark because people lacked light. They were dark because they feared what light might reveal. You smile faintly. The past whispers its final secret. Order is born from fear, and every age invents its own. The bells are silent now. The night is calm. The story ends.